Hello everyone, my name is Pixlriffs and welcome back to the Minecraft Survival Guide. I hope you're all having a good day and you're probably thinking, wait, what? We already got back from the Mushroom Island. This was in the previous episode. Well, welcome to the past for a second, because I have had a visitor here on the Mushroom Island while I've been waiting for phantoms to spawn for the last portion of that previous Mushroom Island episode. And I'm not just talking about the Wandering Trader, because I was down here in the cave just kind of waiting out a couple of nights and actually editing the previous episode. And when I got to the surface, it was evidence that we had had a thunderstorm, because a skeleton horse was standing nearby on the Mushroom Island, and I figured this was an opportunity to record something that I didn't want to just tack onto the end of the last episode, but this is something I really want to cover. So evidently I had my weather turned all the way down, so I didn't hear that there was a thunderstorm to begin with, but of course the thunderstorm has produced this. Skeletal horses can appear after a thunderstorm, or well, during a thunderstorm really, but you'll notice them mostly after a thunderstorm has ended. But what you need to know about this particular skeleton horse is that it's a trap. I need to take off my gold helmet and put on my diamond helmet because things are about to get a little hectic. When we go near this skeleton horse, something specific is going to happen, and it probably needs to be out from underneath that mushroom in order for it to happen properly. But if I walk up to this skeleton horse right now, it's going to be struck by lightning and turn into 4 skeletons riding skeleton horses. And a couple of them will inevitably shoot each other because that's what skeletons often end up doing, and yep, they've even killed one of the horses now. This is turning into a bit of a nightmare. But once you've killed all of the skeletons, we have 3 skeleton horses wandering around, one of which I did just hit with my sword, so that one's probably looking a little the worse for wear. One of them has just wandered down into a cave, because once again, this is what horses do. They're just a little bit derpy sometimes, but these are now our horses. They are rideable skeletal horses, although they do need to be ridden with a saddle, much like other horses, which means I can't exactly saddle one of these things up and take it home with me. You can put leads on them though, so potentially we could get a couple of leads from this Wandering Trader over here, and we could make sure that they're all tied up somewhere safe so that I can bring them back maybe through the nether if I want to. So yes, that is how skeleton horse traps work. It's kind of a weird mechanic actually. You don't tend to see a great deal of them, and skeleton horses have a couple of really interesting, unique properties. I think I'll probably put these 2 down in the cave so they don't disturb the rest of last week's video, I guess. They can come down here, hang out with their friends, and just chill out. But skeleton horses are kind of similar to the other skeletons in the game, in fact, undead mobs in general, in that they are basically immune from drowning. They don't have lungs, therefore they don't suffocate. If this one goes underwater over here, aside from the fact that there are magma blocks down here, which I should probably cover up if I don't want the skeleton horse to take damage, they can just hang out in water for as long as they want to. They shouldn't despawn or anything either, because they are horses, technically, so they're passive mobs. They don't have any kind of attack, and they don't count as hostile mobs. If you got 128 blocks away from them and came back, they would still be there. But yes, this skeleton horse just wandered into the water and is going to quite happily exist in there for a little while, probably. If we had a saddle and a water-breathing potion, we could literally ride the skeleton horse underwater back to the mainland, and probably the only risk at that point would be the drowned attacking us. You'll also notice, if we take a look at the hearts they have here, not a great deal of health on these lads. They've only got about 7 hearts of health, so not the healthiest things in the world. I'm pretty sure they also have a fixed jump height and a fixed speed, so they're not the fastest or the jumpiest horses in the world. It's just kind of interesting that they exist in Minecraft at all, really. Anyway, the sun is about to set. We're probably going to get some phantoms spawning for the last portion of last Friday's video, so back to the future. Hey folks, welcome back. So I've been doing a little bit more work expanding my storage system with a few more materials I thought it would make sense to store in bulk. I've moved the glass over to this side because over on this side I have moved in mycelium as our final dirt type variant that we've got over here, along with all of the grass and moss and coarse dirt and podzol and all of that stuff. I also decided it was probably a good idea to store scaffolding in bulk, so we're going to have a chest here for scaffolding, and next to that we've got soul sand and soul soil, which we'll be harvesting in large quantities from the nether for various projects. On the left hand side here, I decided sandstone should go in here as well, since I was acquiring an awful lot of it and still am. We've got a shulker box of that emptying into the storage system as we speak. And of course obsidian, which right now just has some stone in it because I don't think I set up the filter quite right. But I've been acquiring a fair amount of obsidian from the end and from various other bits and pieces. We're also trading it from our friends the piglins in the piglin bartering setup in the nether. So I'll be acquiring a lot of that for various projects, including some large nether portals that we'll be building in future. Oh, looks like I did set up the filter here. Okay, well at least we can make sure that that's running smoothly and make sure some obsidian gets in the chest so I don't get confused when I open that up and find just a single piece of stone in there. I'm going to keep some obsidian on me in my ender chest for building future nether portals, but that's not what we want to talk about today. I want to ask you, the viewers, a very specific question. What do a pig, a villager, a creeper, an oxidized copper block, and a turtle have in common? The answer is pretty simple, actually. They are all transformed by lightning strikes. This came up during the Mushroom Island video, and people rightly pointed out in the comments that instead of having a channeling trident, which is how I was implying that we could transform one of the mooshrooms into a brown mushroom, you simply need to set up a lightning rod and wait for a thunderstorm. And it's not just the mushroom that will be affected. Each of these other mobs and the oxidized copper block, which is just an exposed copper block, but any of the aged stages of copper will all be transformed by a lightning strike. Now, I've been trying to avoid skipping the weather cycle by sleeping as I've collected all of these things together so that hopefully we'll get a lightning strike soon and I'll be able to show you how all of this works. But naturally, for that to happen, we have to wait for the weather here in Minecraft to worsen into a thunderstorm, which only happens when it's already raining, so we have to wait a little while for a thunderstorm to arrive. But hopefully, one should be here in a matter of minutes, and I can demonstrate the transformation that all of these mobs and this block will undergo. First of all, we need to find a vantage point away from all of the stuff that we've set up here, but from here I think we can just about see everything. We can see the creeper, the pig, the mushroom, the villager down there, and the turtle in a boat. And I've had to arrange them around the lightning rod like this so that hopefully each of them will be affected by a lightning strike when it happens. I'm prepared to defend myself if night comes. We could always torch this area a little bit better to make sure that nothing spawns in a radius around me, but for now, all we have to do is wait. Okay, folks, it might be happening. The lightning rod is sparking up. We have a thunderstorm in place, and now we just have to wait for lightning to strike and see what it does to all of the stuff we've assembled here. I've been waiting long enough that the copper block has fully oxidized, and there we go. Okay, so a lot of stuff has just happened, and one thing I didn't realize was that the charged creeper was going to break out right away. So I'm going to very, very quickly sleep because some other mobs might be around. We have a charged creeper over there that's kind of on the loose, and it looks like I can't sleep because I'm taking damage from the potion of poison that witch threw at me. So, yeah, I have to explain a few things, I think. So let's go back through that footage for a second there and see what happened. Well, the first thing you will notice is that the turtle basically disappeared completely. And what happens when lightning strikes a turtle, which some folks will know if they've seen a recent video by Cubfan, is that it produces a wooden bowl. And unfortunately, the other thing that happens when lightning strikes is that they damage anything within a certain area of effect, including item entities. And item entities are pretty weak as it is. They're typically destroyed by explosions and things like that. So the lightning strike has effectively turned the turtle into a wooden bowl and then immediately destroyed it. So yeah, lightning strikes pretty fatal to turtles, all things considered. As you can see from the fact that we just got poisoned, along with several of the other things that were around here, the villager turned into a witch, and that is actually, I believe, an achievement somewhere in here, but it requires the player to actually strike a villager with lightning yourself. I think it's somewhere in here. Yes, strike a villager with lightning with the trident icon implying that you need to use a trident to do that, and that transforms the villager into a witch, which I will now have to kill because, frankly, I don't really want a witch roaming around during the day. There we go, so we have a witch. You'll notice that the mushroom has completely transformed. The red mushroom we had before has turned into a brown mushroom, which will now, if we do a little bit of experimenting on it in a second, give us suspicious stew as long as we feed it a flower before we milk it using a wooden bowl. And it would have been nice to get the wooden bowl from the turtle for exactly that, but unfortunately that didn't quite happen, did it? The pig transformed into a zombified piglin, which unfortunately died to the next lightning strike thanks to the fact I think that the witch had started throwing potions of poison around and had poisoned it. The copper block in the center here got completely cleaned of all its oxidation. It is now back to being a shiny, fresh, new copper block. And the creeper now has this glowing blue aura around it. I did name tag the creeper beforehand, so it shouldn't despawn if I walk away from it. But this is now a charged creeper, and the explosion from a charged creeper is pretty devastating, as I will hopefully be able to demonstrate for you in a second. The other thing about charged creeper explosions is that they have a chance to give you mob heads from certain mobs, but there are only 3 mobs in the game, well 4 technically, but there are 3 mobs in the game that a charged creeper is required to get the mob head from, and a 4th that it can optionally be used to get a mob head from. So those mobs are creepers, zombies, and skeletons. If you ever go into the creative mode interface and look at player heads in there, you'll find that there is a creeper head, a zombie head, and a skeleton head. And the only way to acquire those in survival is to have a charged creeper blow up the corresponding type of mob. So I'm trying to finagle my way over here so that the charged creeper and this creeper are nearby each other, but that the charged creeper blows up first, killing the regular creeper. And that's a little bit difficult to do in this situation because I am just one guy and these creepers need to get a little bit closer to each other for that to happen. I also want to demonstrate quite how powerful a charged creeper explosion is, so I would like them both to come back on land, but we kind of need the charged creeper to be on land and this creeper to be stationary enough. If we explode the charged creeper in water, we're not going to see the full extent of the explosion, but I think we might be able to get this situation to work out for us here if I hold my shield up in front of me. There we go, okay. So that worked out pretty well. Devastating explosion, massive explosion radius, much worse than a regular creeper explosion. As you can see, this has now dug out an area that's about, what is that, like 10 blocks wide, 4 blocks deep. That is much larger than the average creeper explosion. There might even be a couple of those here on the beach, unless I filled those in, but this looks like it might have been a creeper explosion at one point. This is a charged creeper explosion. They are much worse. But sitting at the bottom of this hole for us is a creeper head from the other creeper, which the charged creeper blew up. And we can pick this up as an item. We can even wear it on our heads if we want to, and now we are in possession of a creeper head, which is going to come in very handy for an episode we're going to do later this week. You can even place these heads in the world as decorations if you want to, similar to how you can with the skeleton skulls and the dragon heads that you get from End City ships. But as you can see, all 5 of the mobs and 1 object that we had around here have undergone a pretty radical transformation. And we're going to take down all of the glass now. I think the reason that the charged creeper was able to get out was because it was in a minecart. The lightning strike actually broke the minecart and then instantly destroyed the item, which is why there's not a minecart hanging around here, similar to what it did with the turtle shell bowl. And because there were only blocks immediately around the creeper, it was able to jump out of the minecart into the next available block, which was one of the corners that was open. So I could have safeguarded ourselves from that charged creeper a little bit better, but honestly that went about as well as we could have expected. So let's let out this brown mooshroom, and we'll talk a little bit about how the brown mooshroom acts, since we weren't able to do that on our Mushroom Island episode the other day because I was forgetting about lightning rods being a thing. If we end up milking a brown mooshroom, similar to what red mooshrooms give you, it'll just give you mushroom stew. But if we end up feeding the brown mooshroom a flower, in this case a dandelion, it'll chomp that down, and then the next bowl we use on it, right-click on that, it will say in the subtitles, "Mooshroom gets milked suspiciously," and we get ourselves suspicious stew, which includes the effect that that flower would have given us if we crafted the suspicious stew ourselves, in this case saturation, because we fed the mooshroom a dandelion. If we feed the mooshroom a different type of flower, then the next suspicious stew we give it will have a completely different effect. In this case, the allium gives us a short amount of fire resistance, but this only takes effect once. You have to feed the mooshroom a flower for every suspicious stew you want to acquire this way, because as we'll see when we right-click on this guy again, he's back to giving us regular mushroom stew. I think we need to find a home for this little guy, actually, because it's kind of novel to have a brown mooshroom in the game. They don't naturally occur on mushroom islands, and you do need to do a lot of red mooshroom breeding, or potentially strike them with lightning if you want to get a decent supply of brown mooshrooms. But the brown mooshrooms can be really useful for acquiring lots and lots of suspicious stew if you want to just milk it yourself instead of farming the mushrooms. And saturation suspicious stew, which we got from feeding the mooshroom a dandelion, can be especially useful because it fills up that behind the scenes saturation value that allows you to heal a little bit faster and prevents you from getting hungry faster. And the fact that we can get it from this brown mooshroom and still eat it, even though our hunger bar is completely full, means that we can fill up on saturation before we go on long journeys, and our hunger bar is going to last just that little bit longer. I think for now he'll be over here with the sheep, who we're going to revisit later on in the week, because I feel like we can do some fun episodes about Easter eggs, and there are a couple of those involving sheep, actually. But while we're talking about lightning strikes, it should probably be noted that if you strike a brown mooshroom with lightning, it will revert back into a red mooshroom, and eventually I believe they'll take enough lightning damage that they may just end up dying. And I think this mooshroom is probably still a little bit the worse for wear because it took a lot of damage from the poison potions that witch was flinging around. So just to make sure I don't accidentally tap it and then kill it by mistake, brown mushrooms are pretty rare, and that one took a while to get back over here, we're going to splash it with a potion of healing. I'll throw both the potions in there so that they can top up with the gunpowder. We can just make ourselves a couple of splash potions of instant health from the ones that we acquired from the end cities, and that should be enough to bring this mushroom back to full health. Looks like the sheep's probably going to get the benefits from this as well. There we go, and hopefully now this mushroom should be right as rain. I'm not going to test that, and I don't really have a way of seeing his health, but I'm just going to trust to the mechanics of the game that this mushroom is nice and healthy again. Now that's pretty much what I wanted to cover as far as lightning strikes go. We will do a lot more with the mechanics of brown mushrooms and charged creepers later in the series, but that's probably where we're going to wrap the lightning section up. One last note I wanted to make before we move on and do some other episodes is that I have now fixed the bee farm in here. Do you remember a little while ago we set this thing up and the bees weren't producing any more honey? They were trying to fly out towards the edges of the farm inside of here, and they weren't focusing on these flowers at all, which meant they weren't producing any more honey bottles. And in fact, this chest looked like this last time we saw it. Well, I'm delighted to report that we have now fixed that, and all of the honey bottles that you see in there were actually produced very recently as we've been hanging around the base and working. And the way I managed to get around the problems that they were having was simply to remove all of the flowering azalea leaves from the outside of our beekeeper's house here, because unfortunately they were causing the bees a lot of pathfinding issues. The bees were trying to get outside of the farm area that we'd closed them off in, and no matter how many solid blocks I put around the enclosure that they're a part of, they simply couldn't find any other flowers. They were just trying to pathfind to blocks on the outside of here. So I think one helpful tip we can draw from that is simply to avoid putting too many flowers or flower blocks around the outside of bee farm builds like this, because now this is all replaced with birch leaves and the regular azalea leaves that don't have flowers on. We don't have any flowering azalea shrubs around here or any of the natural flowers from the fact that this is a forest biome and flowers will show up occasionally. The bees are now producing honey like they should be, and as you can see, we have one extra honey bottle in there. We are slowly topping up on honey. So I've decided that this is going to be Obscure Mechanics Week here in the Survival Guide, and we're not going to cover too much of the super game-breaking stuff. We are going to be covering things which are intended mechanics that have been put into the game by the developers as Easter eggs or optional mechanics that you can explore. But I did want to take a look at a bunch of this stuff now, simply because we're making progress towards larger projects and more interesting stuff and endgame technologies in the game, that I feel like if we don't cover some of this stuff now, it's going to feel insignificant by comparison to some of the stuff that we're doing later. So things like brown mushrooms and pigs converting into zombie pigmen and villagers converting into witches, that kind of stuff, I feel like it makes sense to cover some of that now, and hopefully you'll enjoy the rest of the videos that are on their way this week. You never know, stick around and you might learn something that you didn't know was possible in Minecraft before. Thank you so much for watching this episode of the Minecraft Survival Guide. My name has been Pixlriffs. Please don't forget to leave a like on this video if you enjoyed it, subscribe to my channel if you want to see more, and I'll see you folks soon. Take care. Bye for now.